Folks, I was doing some research and I came across some interesting information that I believe should be shared. The NRA has blood on its hands, and especially from the last mass shooting that they had at that school in Florida. Back in 1984, the Brady Act was passed by Congress. And in the Brady Act, what they had attempted to do was to make the NIC system, NICS, National Instant Background Check System, complete. And when I say complete, I mean complete with all records from all local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, as well as doctors and courts that had adjudicated people with mental deficiencies. So the problem was that the NRA was against that. The same thing that they are railing about, how come these so-called mentally unstable people are able to obtain guns, it's because of the NRA. Mr. Cruz, I guess Nickolas Cruz, that's the name of the shooter, was able to pass a background check because it is not a federal requirement for the states and local municipalities to provide information into the NCIS system. Now, why is that? All right, I'm going to read a portion of the article that I came across, so that you can understand why it's not federally mandated for that information to be in the system. Now remember, I said back in I believe it was 94, when they passed the Brady Act, that information was originally designed to be within the system. But it was the NRA that led the effort to block the federal mandate by financing and arguing before the Supreme Court the case that let the states off the hook. The Supreme Court made a decision in 1997. It's known as Printz v. U.S. United States. And it threw out part of the Brady-Hancock Violence Prevention Act and made it optional for local courts, police departments, and states to submit background information on residents. The Brady Act that was passed established a federal system that screens firearm purchases at licensed dealers. While the FBI built its high-tech NICS system, local police were tasked with conducting the background checks. However, the NRA teamed up with local sheriffs in Montana and Arizona to challenge the law, saying local law enforcement shouldn't be forced to work for the feds. In 1997, the Supreme Court sided with the NRA and Ravalli County Sheriff J. Printz of Montana. The Supreme Court justice who wrote the court's opinion was Justice Antonin Scalia, and it was largely driven by the concepts of federalism. The Constitution's 10th Amendment limited the federal government's power over states and local governments, the courts decided. When the FBI finally got the NICS system up and running in 1998, states submitted criminal and mental health records only voluntarily. And decades later, it's still voluntary. The Printz decision says you cannot commandeer state officials to operate a federal program. Being forced to transmit information to the federal government would fall under Printz. Printz is the reason why this cannot be mandated, said Eric Columbus, a former Justice Department official who encountered similar 10th Amendment issues while developing policies during the Obama administration. States cannot be forced to turn over records that prohibit firearm purchases, like felony convictions, misdemeanor convictions of domestic violence, or involuntary commitments to mental health institutions. To work around that, the Justice Department offers local agencies incentives to do so in the form of federal grant money. Some have used the money to improve public internet access to court records, which are used by FBI NICS examiners. But obviously the system is still incomplete. When a prospective gun buyer's name is submitted for a background check, NICS staffers have only 3 days to compile any outstanding records. If their work is not concluded by then, gun shops are allowed to sell the weapon to the buyer anyway. The resulting gap in the nation's background check system is costing lives. The white supremacist shooter who killed 9 people at a black church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, Dylan Roof, was able to buy a Glock pistol because the FBI did not have a record of his drug arrest. The NRA is strangely silent about their complicity in the lack of information provided to the federal government, the NCIS system, and I just wanted to let you know that it is their fault. It is their fault that people that have mental issues are able to walk into a lot of gun dealerships and buy a weapon. If the federal government, I guess, now wants to do something and they want to play hardball, what they need to do is for the Justice Department to ask every state in the country to voluntarily provide all of the information that they have. And if they choose not to voluntarily provide that information, then it is up to the federal government to voluntarily choose not to provide them any funding, any grant funding from the Department of Justice or any federal agencies. Now, let's see how compliant they choose to be in the name of safety, in the name of protecting our citizens and especially our children. But Mr. Wayne LaPierre, it's your fault. It's your NRA's fault that a lot of these quote unquote mentally deranged people are able to legally buy weapons that they use to murder our citizens. The NRA is full of shit.